And thanks for joining. Just a couple of items. First, we are continuing to press the administration to end the foolish and illegal war in Iran. I gave a talk last night on the Senate floor really about the three unnecessary and illegal wars that the president is engaged in. Boat strikes in the Pacific and Caribbean that, according to the administration's own officials, are not reducing drug flows into the United States. And according to evidence that's been publicly reported that I put on the table last night, is leading to the U.S. military carrying out strike operations, including killing innocent civilians who are narco trafficking. The Venezuelan operation to extract Nicolas Maduro and change the regime that, while from a military standpoint, really impressive, what came after that day-long invasion has been a essential U.S. control over the politics and the economy of another nation, even to the point of propping up the Maduro regime that was conclusively rejected by Venezuelans in 2024 in a presidential election, and the stiff arming of the legitimate opposition that was chosen by the Venezuelans during that election, Nobel laureate Maria Corina Machado, duly elected president, and Mundo Gonzalez. The U.S. has sort of shoved them aside to deal with Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, all kind of under the enforcement umbrella of U.S. military power. And finally, an Iranian war, Trump's war against Iran, that's now past 5 months. 18 troops have died. The administration has been caught recently in a real shameful way trying to reclassify some of those deaths as not connected to the war in Iran, which is incredibly disrespectful to those families. Hundreds of American troops injured. The Pentagon's tried to downplay those injuries in numerous ways. Thousands of civilians in Iran killed, including school children whose school was bombed in the opening days of the war. Tens of billions, probably now in excess of $50 billion spent by the United States in the war, with additional monies to come due as we need to repair U.S. infrastructure in the region that has been damaged. And then the part of this that comes home to every American, dramatic escalations in gasoline prices, fertilizer prices for farmers, goods and inputs for American businesses, because the closure of the Straits of Hormuz, which was an easily predictable outcome as the president decided whether to wage this war, has made shipment of goods and services much more difficult. Recently, as the Saudis have joined in with the United States, Houthis in Yemen have attacked Saudi positions and also threatened to close or disrupt another key transit area, the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. And so this is now growing and expanding to other nations throughout the region. It's making the global economy less stable. It's shredding the U.S. reputation as a stabilizing influence in the world, punishing Americans in their pocketbooks, costing troop losses and injuries. And where's it going? You know, every day it seems like there's a new announcement, and it might be a ceasefire or the president's claim last night, and I will not quote him because it was shockingly obscene for a guy who's supposed to be a serious commander-in-chief, that, okay, we need to beat the X out of these Iranians. So are we in a ceasefire, or we have obliterated their capacity, or we now need to bomb them more because they're attacking us? I mean, it's just a complete chaotic disaster right now. The only answer is to get a ceasefire that involves reopening the straits and ending the blockade on Iranian ports, and then putting every other item on the table for serious negotiation with a reduced pressure war. And that's what needs to happen. And that can happen if the president would allow his diplomats to pursue that. Both the president and Iran seem to want an off-ramp for the war, and the deal is right there. Reopen the straits, end the blockade on Iranian ports, take all the issues to the negotiating table, quit punishing Americans. We're going to keep offering war powers resolutions. There will be a vote on one today to tell the president to stop the war. When we began on the resolution I filed a few days before the war started, because I predicted what the president would do, we could get one Republican vote. Then suddenly it was two. Then a few weeks later it was three. Then a few weeks later it was four. We continue to believe that more Republicans will join this effort to instruct the president to stop this foolish war, because we sort of know what they're hearing from their constituents. This war is overwhelmingly unpopular. The American public wishes it hadn't been started, and they want it to come to an end, and I'll do what I can to make sure that happens. I just came out of a very kind of upbeat meeting of the Health, Education, Labor, Pension Committee, where we were marking up in a bipartisan way much legislation. Marking up means passing out of committee much important bipartisan legislation. I was a co-sponsor of a number of pieces of legislation dealing with, the stability of pensions and other key issues. But the piece that I worked on the hardest was the effort to stop the Trump administration's effort to dismantle the Department of Education and hand off critical functions of the department that are mandated by statute to be done by the DOE to other agencies who have no interest or expertise in actually handling those responsibilities. There are about 14 different sort of functional areas within the DOE, and I worked with two colleagues, Senator Collins and Murkowski on the Republican side, together with two Democratic colleagues, Senator Baldwin and Hassan, to find a bipartisan accord. If we can't agree on everything, what is a core that we can agree on that should stay within the Department of Education? And we ended up coming up with 4 functional areas that actually cover 9 of the 14 programs within DOE. We are going to retain within the Department of Education special education and rehabilitative services, tribal education, rural education, and K-12 education. Those core responsibilities of DOE will now not be handed off to the Department of Labor, not be handed off to HHS, headed by a vaccine skeptic who's an anti-science guy, and not be handed off to any other agency either. We were able to pass that with a nice bipartisan vote in the Senate Health, Education, Labor, Pension Committee. And that's not the same as passing it through both houses and getting it to the president's desk. We still have more work to do. But the good news is this, by a strong and bipartisan vote in the authorizing committee saying these services have to stay with DOE, both of the lead Senate appropriators, Susan Collins, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and Patty Murray, the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, are on the Health Committee, and they supported this bill. And that means when they go into an appropriations negotiation with their House colleagues, they'll go with a clear, strong bipartisan statement from the Senate that these core responsibilities shouldn't transfer. And that, I think, will give us a real good guardrail. And I know that especially students and the parents of students with disabilities were particularly active in advocating for the passage of my bill. They were very present at the hearing today, and it was really an honor to work with them to accomplish a good result in a bipartisan way. I want to thank the chairman of the committee, Senator Cassidy, who actually voted against my proposal, but he actually gave me a commitment a month ago that I would get a vote on the best bipartisan bill I could put together. Whether or not he agreed with it, he committed that I would get a vote on the best bipartisan bill I could put together. And so I honor him, or thank him for honoring that commitment. And he was key to making sure we could forward that to the floor. The third thing I'll notice is, while I was in that hearing today, the president apparently tweeted out that he's okay with withdrawing Todd Blanche to be considered to be Attorney General nominee until early next year. And so why would that be? He said all these really wonderful things about Todd Blanche and why he thinks Todd Blanche would be great. He expressed a desire to withhold the Blanche nomination because 2 Republicans, Senators Tillis and Cornyn, had asked Blanche to formally retract any settlement of litigation against the Trump family that would either give the Trump family preferred privileged position with respect to tax audits or create a slush fund that could be used to reward cronies of the president who he asserted had the justice system weaponized against them in the earlier administration. Now, Blanche has sort of half said that he might walk this back, but all the Republicans were asking, and again, these are not Democratic requests, they want this too and more, but all the two Republicans were asking is walk back the slush fund and walk back the preferred treatment of the Trump family on tax audits. If Blanche had been willing to make that commitment, he would have had the votes necessary to pass. So it's fascinating that President Trump would rather the key position of Attorney General remain vacant for the next 6 months than allow the Attorney General to state what Americans overwhelmingly believe, that a president and his family shouldn't be above the law and that we shouldn't have a slush fund that can be used willy-nilly by a president to reward political cronies. Fascinating that the president put such a low priority on the administration of justice and such a high priority on being able to have somebody who will just do his own bidding, not for the good of the country, but for the good of his own political cronies and family. With that, I'm glad to open it up and take your questions.
First up is Mark from CBS 19.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Senator, just want to get your thoughts on the Wintergreen Emergency Egress Act passed the Senate committee. I know this has been, in the works for quite a while, so just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yes, so this is an issue that's a really important one that we hope we would never need. But, Wintergreen is a wonderful community in Nelson County, and a lot of people live pretty far up the mountain where access off the Wintergreen campus in the event of an emergency at the bottom of the mountain would be difficult. And so what we have long proposed is that there be an emergency exit from the top of the mountain onto the Blue Ridge Parkway, that exit be closed and locked, but that it could be open in the event of emergency, say a wildfire or some other, extreme weather event, mudslides or something like that. People could have an exit out of the upper end of Wintergreen and not just out of the lower end. We've pushed this for years, Senator Warner and I, together with kind of a successive group of members of Congress who've represented the 5th District. We've tried to get this done. It's positive that this move is being made on the Senate. It is a potentially part of a package of a number of public lands related bills that I hope the Senate will take up before year end. Often we do public lands packages at year end in both houses where we just put in a whole series of these packages, a whole series of these initiatives, and the ones that are bipartisan get in, and the ones that aren't bipartisan don't. This is bipartisan, so we hope we can get it over the finish line this year.
Next is Mitchell from WTOP.
Hey, Mitchell.
Hey, Senator. Good afternoon. You have mentioned using congressional power of the purse to send a message to the Trump administration on the war with Iran. Senate Majority Leader Thune has indicated he is in no hurry to pass the House budget blueprint that includes close to $70 billion for the war. Do you think that funding for the war is going to stall and not get approved before the summer recess? And what do you think will happen with the NDAA?
It does sound as if this war funding request from the president is not going to get called up in the Senate before the recess, because right now it doesn't have the votes. The Republicans could move this via a budget reconciliation process where they could do it just with Republican votes, 51 votes, or even 50 with the tiebreaker from the VP. But I'm not sure they have that even on the Republican side. And so if Senator Thune is suggesting that they won't bring it up, it's because they don't have the Republican votes to do it, even on a simple majority. I believe my Democratic colleagues are strongly in opposition to voting for a war funding bill when we have told the president that you've broken the Constitution by starting this war without coming to Congress, B, violated the War Powers Act by extending the war past the 60-day deadline that arguably gives you some leeway. And C, now both houses of Congress under Republican majority have directed the president, stop the war, remove troops from hostilities unless you get an authorization. And the president is doing neither. He's putting more troops in harm's way, and he is not asking for an authorization because he knows that vote would lose in such a dramatic fashion. So if the president isn't going to follow the law, the Constitution, the statute, or the concurrent resolution that we passed, then we need to use the appropriations tools.
Thank you very much.
Next is Michael from Virginia Public Radio.
Hey, Senator,
Hey,
thanks for
Michael.
doing this.
Yep.
A quick question about the merger between Dominion Energy and Florida-based NextEra. So now that the application has been filed, there's a 6-month window, which means the state regulators need to make a decision in like mid-January.
Yep.
A lot of people think that's not enough time. Lieutenant Governor Ghazala Hashmi agrees with the idea that you should extend that deadline past mid-January and also to have a special session in order to make that happen, to extend that deadline. There's some Republicans from the Roanoke area that are calling for a special session. I'm wondering where you are on the merger, and do you think that 6-month timeline should be extended? And what would your advice be to the governor about calling a special session to extend that deadline?
Michael, I would not currently have any advice for the governor because I've not really paid attention to the argument about the extension. I mean, look, it is a big, complicated merger. I'd be curious, for example, about whether the state regulators themselves think 6 months is sufficient. If the SCC, for example, were to say that's not sufficient for us to do the work, you'd have to really pay attention to it because they are the ones that are actually performing that analysis. I don't know that the SCC has weighed in on this. I know some legislators have suggested more time is necessary. Look, it's a big, complicated merger, and it's going to affect Virginians in real significant ways. And I think it needs to be analyzed to see what are the upsides and what are the downsides. And I have no doubt there will be upsides and there will be downsides. An upside might be the renewable energy portfolio that this merger would create. That could be a real positive. The downside that I'm sure is going to be the one that is the most analyzed is what is going to be the effect on consumers, primarily families, but also business consumers in terms of their power rates. Virginia has been benefited relatively, especially some parts of the state, in having reliable power at relatively reasonable rates. And I know that every legislator and and the regulators are going to want to look at that very carefully. And I don't have a predetermination of that, but it has to be analyzed carefully. And if 6 months is sufficient, that's fine. If 6 months is not sufficient, let's not rush it.
Next is Jada from WSET.
Hey, Jada.
Hi, Senator. So yesterday, Dr. Anthony Fauci repeatedly invoked the Fifth rather than answering questions in front of a Senate committee. So regardless of your opinions on that hearing, do you believe the American people deserve more answers on the government's COVID response? And should Dr. Fauci eventually answer those questions voluntarily?
So Dr. Fauci answered a whole lot of questions. I mean, it's not like he took the Fifth on every question. There were, as I understand it, members of the Senate committee, and I'm not on that committee, so I was not at the hearing and I haven't had a chance to watch it. But members of the committee each got 10 minutes to ask questions. And my understanding is Dr. Fauci answered a lot of questions. What he objected to was a belief that some of the questions were really sort of the witch hunt variety. Bottom line is, yeah, Americans are entitled to answers about COVID. I think the nation, we did some things well and we did some things poorly. And if we're going to get answers, let's put them all on the table, including what was the president's, continued use of misinformation about ivermectin or light injections. I think the White House itself contributed to significant amount of misinformation during the opening months of COVID. And to the extent that folks want to say, well, how come there's low trust in the public health communication? let's not just examine what Dr. Fauci or the NIH said. Let's look at what messages were coming out of the White House.
Thank you.
You bet.
Next is Brendan from WTKR.
Hi, Senator. Question for you about HII and Newport News Shipbuilding.
Yes.
You know, it was announced that they got more contracts to build submarines. Wanted to get your thoughts on that, but also whether you believe the workforce will be there. I know I did a story with you in 2023 at the apprentice school where, you know, there were some concerns being raised about the number of employees in the actual industry. So just wondering if you still have those concerns a few years later, or,
Yep.
you know, if you think things have gotten better.
No, I think it's gotten better, but we still have work to do, Brennan. So good news on the contract. And it's actually easier to get a workforce and get the supply chain straight when you have long-term contracts, because then you can hire people with some knowledge that you're not going to have to be looking at them in a year and saying, I'm sorry, there's no work there. So contracts like this actually make it easier to attract work and then retain it, workers, and build out the supply chain that's needed. We're still not building subs, either the Virginia or Columbia class subs, at the pace we need to. We're making a lot of investments. HII is. General Dynamics, the other shipyard in Connecticut that works in tandem with HII on submarine construction, is. We're building up the workforce, but we still have to do more to hit the production pace that we need, both for American defense needs, but also we've now made a commitment to transfer certain subs to the Australians in the 2030s to enable us to have a more robust network of seaborne defense and deterrent in the Indo-Pacific. So if we're going to meet our own needs and ability to transfer probably some gently used subs to the Aussies, we got to upscale production. Some of that's workforce, but some of it is also facilities. You know the HII shipyard really well. It's pretty much built out. You know, on that campus, it's not like there's a lot of unused space. So HII has, for example, gone to the Fairwind site in Norfolk, which used to be part of the Port of Virginia that was then not being in use, and they're actually doing some work there. And I also think we have a very robust shipbuilding ecosystem in Hampton Roads that has some additional capacity. So we need to challenge HII and General Dynamics. Are you using the other shipbuilders and ship repairers to produce components that you could then install on the subs? Because if there's some work you can do off your campus and then bring it on, it gives you the ability to use your campus in a more productive way. So the workforce is upticking. That's great. The contract will enable a strong demand signal that can attract even more workers. But let's make sure if there's work that can effectively be done outside the shipyard gates by others, that we're effectively including them in order to, meet the pace we need to.
Last up is Michael from the Richmond Times-Dispatch.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah, good afternoon, Senator. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. I'm curious about the president's announcement of a massive rehaul of Dulles Airport with a $22 billion price tag. You and Senator Warner and Congressman Subramaniam both applauded that. My question is, how realistic is it? I mean, I see reports that it's $22 billion, a convention center, outside companies managing it, which is apparently unusual. What do you think is the proof in the pudding here?
Michael, I'll tell you, when this idea got floated, some of the original proposals that the White House was interested in, they sort of saw it, like it was maybe a formal RFP, but they went out and said, hey, look, who would like to come in and help us upgrade Dulles? Some of the original proposals would have really put the control of the project in the hands of private equity companies and others who don't even have like a Virginia home base. And I was very, very nervous about that. As you know, I worked really hard when I was governor with the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority and WMATA to build the Silver Line to Dulles so that finally the nation's premier international airport serving the nation's capital would be accessible to this high quality public transportation. It's the single hardest project I've ever worked on in 32 years in public life. And when we did the groundbreaking there at Dulles of the station, I'm sorry, not the groundbreaking, the ribbon cutting for that station opening, I knew it would be a success. And there have now been nearly 6 million Silver Line passengers who have gotten off at that Dulles stop. It's been a huge success. But having worked on that for so long, I was really skeptical of any proposal that would put the control of this entity in somebody else's hands than the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. And so I'm really happy that MWA and United, having invested so much in Dulles as a key hub, came together and said, you don't need to bring anybody else in to do this, we'll do this. And I think that keeps the overall supervision, oversight, ownership of this project in the right hands. Will there be opportunities for private investment in a convention center and hotel facilities and other retail operations? Sure. And that's fine. I'm fine with that. I think the ability to attract private investment is a positive. The MWA has a capital structure where they can take their bonds out onto the market, and they've been very, very successful in raising funding by bonds. So I think the MWA bonding capacity plus United's commitment plus other opportunities for private sector players to invest, this can end up being a real template, not only to improve Dulles, but for other airports around the country as well.
Thank you. That's great.
You bet.